I'm going to play you a 30-second clip, Pratyush. And this is from an interview that you did in 2010, about 10 years ago. And I want to focus specifically on the predictions that you're making here.
Mobile payments. As you know, mobiles are big in India. There are like 700 million odd connections and things like that. So people will increasingly start to do business on mobile phones. That is given.
So more mobiles equals more payments equals more companies that do mobile payments.
The government is also realizing that this is something that is going to take off. So they are building an ecosystem where, the banks will be there from one side, merchants will be there, consumers will be there. All of them will be sharing their information according to a certain set of rules.
So that's UPI.
The other indicator is that in India, 3G connections are coming in. We don't have 3G yet, but the licenses for that have been issued. The telecom providers have paid a lot of money for those licenses. Yeah, they will have to monetize it some way. So I think that is going to change the way which we consume information in India.
You're describing 3G, not 4G, but your point stands. More accessible internet will change the way Indians interact with markets. Right, so let's quickly recap. In those 30 seconds, you covered 1, the rise of the Indian payments market, 2, the basis for this totally obscure technology that we now call UPI, and 3, the proliferation and its impact of easy internet to the Indian masses. So I just have one very simple question for you. Do you have any lottery numbers that you're feeling good about? Welcome to the 20 Minute Moat, a Verloop.io podcast where we talk about everything customer, support, and automation. Hosted by me, Anush Fernandez, we interview decision makers at some of the most influential companies in the world to understand how they're changing the future, or in this case, making it. Today we have on the show Prasanna, head of merchant payments at GoCheck. We talk about how he stays motivated even when the tides are against him.
I do yoga in the morning. I have done pranayam every day for the last 13 years. I haven't missed a single day.
How he made it out of the small Indian town of Bhubaneswar, heading payments at one of the most innovative companies in the world.
Most of us give a huge value to education. The people who qualify for IITs get printed in newspapers, etc.
And we use this prophetic crystal ball to understand where India will be 10 years from now.
And UPI has fundamentally changed the game. The next 3 to 5 years will be an age of consolidation.
So let's start off by asking, what exactly is it that you do at GoCheck?
So my present role is that I head merchant payments at GoCheck. As with any payments company, right? There is an issuing side, which is where consumers like us use that for paying. But I look at the merchant side, which is the or called as the acquiring side, where my team enables merchants to accept payments both offline and online. GoCheck being a primarily Indonesia-based company, we enable merchants to accept online payments, offline payments in Indonesia and a few other countries that GoCheck is there.
What makes Indonesia such an interesting market?
Well, I think, as you rightly said, Indonesia is an extremely interesting market. The growth here is very comparable to what is happening worldwide. Of course, there is a blip due to COVID for sure. But having said that, overall transactions, when you count online plus offline, haven't actually gone down that, right? So from a region perspective, Indonesia has a lot of advantages because as India also went through its own stage of people rapidly adopting technology and newer payment methods, Indonesia is going through that right now. You can see a lot of new technologies coming in, a lot of banks evolving to support newer paradigms of payments, and also it being a competitive market in terms of newer players as well, right?
Why is it ideal for a $10 billion startup like GoCheck?
I think it's the right place because one critical thing that GoCheck did was that we built our capabilities on both the issuing side as well as on the acquiring side. So for example, Midtrans, which is the largest payment gateway in Indonesia, is a part of GoCheck, right? Spots, which is the largest kind of non-bank payment terminal deployment in Indonesia, is also part of GoCheck. And we have hundreds of thousands of static QR codes as well as terminals across the country which accept GoPay. So that enables us to have a much bigger footprint than anyone else. And also a lot of stickiness, right? Because people wouldn't generally move away from these. People, instance, merchants don't generally move away as fast as consumers do. So as a market, quite fast moving, which is the most exciting about this. It was very interesting because worldwide, if you see payment companies either do a great job online or offline, right? But because we have these properties, we could potentially, do a lot of interesting stuff for us.
When most people in the Western world think of payments, they probably think of Stripe, right? What makes Stripe so good, and where does a company of that size sort of go from there?
As you rightly said, Stripe has been one of the maybe path-breaking payment companies in the last 7 to 8 years. Right? They came into a sector which people thought was pretty much solved by, let's say, PayPal and others, but, kind of disrupted the whole sector. However, I think, as I said, the multiple avenues of growth in payments. One is the regional expansion. So Stripe generally has been quite aggressive at expanding regionally. They have footprints in Africa. They have investments across the region, and I think they have a really good value prop for cross-border kind of scenarios, right? Having said that, they also are doing cautious steps in the whole offline market, because worldwide offline is much bigger than online, every market, including US, right? Players in payment do realize that offline is a very lucrative market because it's just so big. So Stripe has been doing forays there in terms of terminals that accept cards, etc. So to answer your question, there are multiple ways in which payment companies can grow. Our region, Asia, Southeast Asia, is one of the most interesting growth areas for online payment acceptance. The second one is more touch points, which is go offline, go into newer scenarios, tie tightly into POS systems. So all those are also initiatives that most of these companies are looking at.
What role do you think GoCheck's culture plays in achieving some of these lofty goals? Is there anything that you think other companies can take away from this?
I think incremental developments are actually much more important than big events. We count our life in big events, but the incremental stuff that you do regularly, like, for example, reading a newspaper, etc., is actually quite important to get you where you are. So GoCheck, for example, has a lot of incrementality built into the culture. Like from the time of when you stop coding all the way till it gets released, there is a process for everything in the whole journey. The way that feedback is collected, all the way how PMs read it, all the way how it goes into the product is also kind of well documented, iterated, and questioned regularly as well, so that you keep on making it better. Yeah, some of these things you don't really write about it, but once it gets into your culture, right, then it is a natural thing that you do. Most companies do take time to build their own kind of culture. And we have built one where there is a lot of focus on building better processes and making it constantly better.
I live in Bangalore, so I know GoCheck has an office here. You're based out of Singapore, so GoCheck has an office there as well. GoCheck is obviously an Indonesian company, so there's another office there. Talk to me about the importance of culture in a tech-first company that's so spread out.
I think GoCheck, as you rightly said, has a very tech-heavy, tech-first kind of culture. The founders realized a long time ago that a lot of the core tech could be built out of India. So a lot of our core teams actually sit out of Bangalore, India. Literally a few of the most important teams across GoCheck, because we do a lot of things, sit in India. The culture in general is also, as you rightly said, very technology heavy, where first try and find a graceful technology solution to most problems. And also general culture of being like a startup, like the day zero, as Amazon calls it, where every day is day zero. You're starting out, what do you need to do to be the best, the most app or merchants in business, right? We do also have a very strong culture of getting feedback fast and incorporating that into the products. So we have very big team in terms of merchant research and plowing that back into our products.
How do you think this culture helped you with the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially work from home?
We were distributed like Indonesia, India, and Singapore, and some of the local markets as well. We actually did a very good job during COVID because it did not really affect us because we were used to remote working throughout. Of course, it was easier, setting relationships and meeting people and doing code reviews when you're at the same place. But GoCheck has a very strong culture of working remotely, which helped us a great deal. Like literally, we are everyone from the CEO to everyone down is work from home till January, right? And frankly, it hasn't affected our working question at all. To the extent that, like Microsoft and some other companies are realizing, we are also thinking of how we can optimize our work from home to a large extent. A lot of it was helped by strong processes around already working remotely, and basically technology being the tiebreaker than individual kind of ego. So that way, it's quite healthy as a culture.
What is the impact of COVID on a lot of what is happening right now?
So COVID is a black swan event, right? Unfortunately, it has destroyed lifestyles and livelihoods in that sense. It's almost impossible to predict after COVID what will happen. But I personally think that post-COVID recovery for India will be rapid, primarily because any vaccine that is made will most probably be made in India. That is going to make sure that we come out of COVID quite rapidly. And having said that, there is India also is a very entrepreneurial country. should go back to normal, thereby kind of making the growth much more hockey stick than like a slow U kind of growth that people are talking about. I am a big optimist that once a viable vaccine comes in, not like whatever Russia and China are talking about, but real viable vaccine comes out, we will have massive growth in India.
Switching gears from the international stuff, you had quite the humble upbringing. You were born in Bhubaneswar, which isn't really what people think of when they think of the big Indian IT boom of the 21st century. Talk to me about the democratic nature that technology and education played in your upbringing.
Technology was there in terms of coding and how do you build applications that run on operating systems. Internet came a little bit later, but you are right in the sense that India actually, because of the fact that some institutions are almost totally democratic, like the engineering colleges, and actually most education is almost completely democratic, that it allows people from smaller towns having exposure to technology and building careers and building a lot of wealth around it, right? Even for example, Vijay, founder of Paytm, is a great example. He's from like Ghaziabad, right, which is also a small town. Grew up there. Parents were teachers, right? So it's not like you came with a silver spoon. Most of us give a huge value to education. People who qualify for IITs get printed in like newspapers, etc. I think that's a big deal because it shows how social change can actually be brought about by education. What a lot of people talk about service companies, I think they allowed people to see that, hey, there is an option for doing well for yourself if you go into technology, right? Also created a lot of wealth for the country, contributing to GDP. And I think the effects of that are being seen now. As you rightly said, the democratization of education has helped grow the general your country standard of living as well as the general gross domestic happiness in a sense.
Alongside getting to where you've got in life, continuing to move upwards is also fairly important. To that end, building a system of continuous learning is also key. What books do you read for that? Is there one that stands out to you?
Unfortunately, I do read a lot of books. So I don't think there is one book that has influenced me. At different stages of your life, different books influence your decision making and thought process. I think I've gotten a lot more deliberate about both food and books, where if I don't like something, I just don't eat it or don't read it. Having said that, there are a few books that I really kind of like, right? One is The Art of War, which I actually do keep reading once in a while. The second one is I really like Ben Horowitz and his general books. I use books as a mental exercise, or I use reading as a mental exercise. So regular reading for me is a lot more important than any particular one. So which is why, I regularly read a newspaper, which here is the New York Times, and at least one magazine, which is The Economist. So yeah, I mean, at least they help you shape a point of view, and books are like more outliers in between. But I read a lot of nonfiction and fiction as well. So
as someone who's founded a lot of startups and currently works in a fast-paced tech company where the stakes are always high, you're obviously no stranger to stress. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
I think, as I said, the incrementality aspect or maybe the discipline part helps. For example, I do yoga in the morning. I have done pranayam every day for the last maybe 13 years. I haven't missed a single day. It's like, going to the gym for some people. I think discipline greatly helps keep you self-motivated. The second is have some anchors who you can talk to, who do not have any personal or professional attachments with you. One of the anchors that I have is my father. I talk to, and a few people that I've kept in touch, ex-colleagues, right? Now they don't have any professional kind of advantages that they can gain. The people you can talk frankly to, share without any expectation of reward or punishment, and you can be very frank with it. So that's, I think, the second one where you can talk. And the third I found for me personally is to actually write down some of the thoughts that you have, especially the thoughts that you think are demotivating, because writing down makes you structure, and you might actually be rabbit holing into one point, which might actually not be important at all. So writing down helps a lot. I do maintain like a personal emails to me kind of thing where, it's more like collating your thoughts and writing it down. It's more about the process and act of kind of writing down. In some cases, alcohol also helps.
Obviously, during the course of the pandemic, staying motivated is something that a lot of employees really struggle with. How do you stay motivated? And more importantly, how do you motivate your team?
One of the key functions of any leader in a company is to keep the team motivated. There are always motivational issues, right? Like whether it is a lot of work, whether it is pandemic, whether it is personal issues that people have, etc. Right? I generally always try to motivate people with a larger goal. One of the things that I've learned over my experience and I really like about GoCheck is that the vision of the company is about helping everyone grow. It's not only about GoCheck. It's not only about our customers. Just to give an example, one of the studies said that GoCheck contributed to about 1% of Indonesia's overall GDP last year. Right? I mean, just to give a ballpark, if the US achieves GDP growth of 2%, it's considered great. Just the fact that we enabled country to grow by 1% is a pity. The bigger picture is always and should always be in our mind of what effect you're bringing about in society as a whole. That's one way that I like to motivate my. The second one is also kind of both professional and personal. It's usually about hearing people out about what is really bugging them, which might actually not totally be related to maybe the team. It could be something personal that he wants to share about, right? Or maybe it is about the interactions with one particular member, right? But you need to kind of talk through and listen, which is quite important, especially when you are in a meeting where you know that the other person is not motivated or has been facing motivation issues. It's very important to hear them out rather than give your opinion, which is generally very difficult for a person who talks a lot like me, but I do my best to hear people in such cases. The third one is realigning people towards their own personal goals. One of the things I do in my one-on-ones is that I generally do not talk about work progress. Like, for example, if there is a person in the support team, I don't talk about what is the progress of support. I talk about how he is progressing towards his goals that he wanted to achieve at the beginning, right? Which are not OKRs, which are how do you want to grow as a person and have you achieved some of those, right? So in many cases, advise them for better communication or make them read about things that are not their comfort area, like technology guy learning more about finance, for example. So things like that. I think some of those things help where the person knows that you have their best interest at mind. So I do use some of these genuinely value-adding approaches for motivating people.
People in tech have this principle of paying it forward, right? That you've been lucky, now you must help someone else sort of get off the ground. How do you give back?
So I think at the beginning we started off with this, which is, I do informally and formally help out a lot of startups. Almost never say no, unless of course it's like we ask on time, but almost never say no to incoming kind of questions, thoughts, etc. Even Gaurav, for example, reaches out to me and he's thinking of a problem or facing an issue, then he's speaking. Then the second one is I do, not very regularly now, but I do invest in companies, especially the things that I understand like payments and messaging and stuff. But maybe that's a way of giving back. I don't expect like monetary returns. Obviously, monetary returns are great, but I don't expect any monetary returns. It's more from helping them off the ground. And the third one is, at least in the scope of work, I try to incorporate some of them. For example, when I was at Paytm with Vijay's blessings, we actually had a lot of startups work in the same office and also contribute to Paytm if possible. Similarly, at GoCheck, one of the things that I got started was how do we enable more startups to come out of Indonesia, right? Can we make it easy for them to accept payments or free for them to accept payments? So we do a lot of that as well. Or I try to do a lot of that.
Now, obviously, like we talked about at the top of the show, you looked into that crystal ball about 10 years ago and you just absolutely nailed it, right? What do you think the next 10 years holds for us?
India is in a stage where, at least from a payments perspective, the market has reached some sort of saturation in a sense. And UPI has fundamentally changed the game in many aspects. But I think the next 3 to 5 years will be an age of consolidation, right? The bigger players will massively consolidate and some huge players are already emerging in that sense. After 5 to 7 years, there will be 2 or 3 big players very similar to what China has now, the Tencent and Alibaba in terms of payments. There will also be massive realignment where, for example, Amazon, Paytm might be forced to kind of join hands, or Amazon or Reliance, or Paytm or Reliance might be forced to join hands to just make sure that they are the bigger players in the market. Right? Some of those consolidations will happen. As you can see, some of that is already happening, like Future Group plus Reliance. I also personally think that from a consumer usage point of view, the cost of doing transactions has fallen. Now it is almost zero, which will make sure that people are happy to do much more digital transactions. The multiplier effects of that are huge because, then subsidies will go to the right people. You will not lose a lot of money due to corruption. Inefficiency should decrease across the society as a whole.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the 20 Minute Moat presented by Verloop.io. We post new episodes, bonus content, and full interviews on our website and social media. Just visit verloop.io/podcast, no more. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen from. It means a lot